My name is Heidi Stead, 31 years old, and the night I asked the man I loved to marry me, he didn't look surprised. He looked inconvenienced, not confused, not overwhelmed, just like I had brought something unnecessary into a perfectly controlled room. His name was Caleb Foster, 29, corporate attorney in Boston, already moving through his firm like he belonged in the corner office long before anyone gave it to him. The kind of man who didn't just chase success, he engineered it, dissected it, optimized it. And for 3 years, I thought I was part of that design. We had this strange, almost poetic balance. Sunday mornings, I'd be in the kitchen making pancakes while he turned our table into a battlefield of contracts and case files. I'd tease him about legal language sounding like ancient codes. He'd argue back, telling me history was just law with better storytelling. We didn't finish each other's sentences, but we understood each other's silences. Or at least, I thought we did. Looking back now, the truth was always there. Quiet, consistent, easy to ignore if you loved someone enough. The canceled dinners, the vacations where he answered emails poolside while I watched couples laugh over drinks, the way he'd tense, just slightly, whenever I talked about the future like it was something shared instead of something negotiated. I told myself it was temporary. That love required patience. That ambition and partnership could coexist if you just held on long enough. I didn't realize I was the only one holding on. The proposal happened at our steakhouse, the same one we'd been going to since our fourth date. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours. The waiters knew us. They knew he liked extra bread before the meal, knew I always ordered the same cut of steak, knew how we sat, him leaning forward, always engaged, always analyzing, me relaxed, watching him like he was something fascinating. It felt safe. It felt like history. And I thought, it was leading somewhere. I had my grandmother's ring in my pocket. I'd driven out to my parents' house 2 weeks before just to pick it up. My mom cried when she handed it to me, her fingers lingering on the velvet box like she was passing down more than jewelry. "She's special," she told me. I didn't correct her. I wanted it to be true. That night, when the plates were cleared and the noise of the restaurant softened into that comfortable hum, I felt it. That moment where everything is about to change. My heart was racing, but it was a hopeful kind of fear. The kind that means you're about to step into something bigger than yourself. I stood up, and that's when everything shifted. Caleb's face changed. Not slowly, not subtly. Instantly. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to my hands, then back to my face. Not with curiosity, but calculation. "Heidi, what are you doing?" he asked. His tone cut through the moment like something sharp and cold. Around us, people had already started to notice. A couple at the next table smiled knowingly. Somewhere behind me, I heard a phone unlock. The quiet anticipation of strangers waiting for a romantic moment to unfold. I ignored all of it. I opened the box. "I'm asking you to marry me." For a split second, time held its breath. Then he shook his head. "I can't." Just like that. No hesitation. No softness. No struggle. The room didn't react immediately. It was like reality lagged behind the moment. People were still smiling, still expecting a different ending. I sat back down slowly, my body moving before my mind caught up. My chest felt hollow, not broken yet, just empty, like something had been quietly removed without my permission. "Can't," I repeated softly. "Or won't." He exhaled, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his expression. Not guilt, not regret. Annoyance. Like I was forcing him to explain something obvious. Then he did what he always did. He made it logical. "Making partner isn't optional for me," he said, his voice steady, measured, almost detached. "It requires total commitment. 80-hour weeks, travel, availability at any time. Marriage means division. It means obligations I can't afford." Obligations. That's what I was. Not a partner, not a future. An obligation. I felt the words settle somewhere deep inside me, heavier than they should have been. I'm not asking you to give that up, I said quickly, leaning forward, trying to bridge the distance that had suddenly appeared between us. We can wait. Years if we have to. There's no timeline. I want to know we're building towards something. He shook his head. Slow. Certain. Like he'd already gone through this conversation in his mind. We'd still be dividing focus, he replied. Even if it's not immediate. Then nothing has to change, I insisted. Keep everything exactly the same. I just want to be part of your future. Another shake of his head. Each response precise, efficient, final. Those are temporary solutions, he said. They don't fix the underlying issue. My stomach dropped. What issue? He held my gaze then. Calm, unmoved. We're not aligned, he said. You want partnership. I need independence. Those aren't compatible. Incompatible. 3 years. 18 months living together. Hundreds of quiet mornings and late-night conversations and shared routines. Reduced to a single word. I looked down at the ring in my hand. Suddenly, it felt too heavy, like it belonged to a different story, a better one. I closed the box slowly. The sound was soft, but it echoed louder than anything else in that room. Thank you for being honest, I said. The words surprised even me. His eyes flickered, just slightly. He expected resistance, emotion, a scene, something that would prove he mattered enough to fight for. But something inside me had already gone still. If I have to convince you to marry me, I added quietly, meeting his eyes one last time, then you're not the person I should be marrying. That was the moment everything ended. Not when he said no, but when I understood he'd never planned to say yes. Outside, the cold air hit like truth settling into place. Sharp, unforgiving. He sat in his car, hands gripping the wheel like he was bracing himself for something. I stood there, watching him. I hope you make partner, I told him. And I meant it. Even with my heart sitting somewhere unrecognizable in my chest, even knowing I had just been removed. He nodded once, then drove away. I watched his taillights disappear into the dark, telling myself that this was closure, that this was clean, that this was two adults choosing different paths. But 3 days later, I learned the truth. He hadn't rejected me that night. He had already erased me that morning. Before I even reached for the ring, he had already told his firm he had no personal attachments, no complications, no one. I wasn't someone he loved but couldn't choose. I was something he had already decided to eliminate, and in that moment, the heartbreak turned into something colder, something sharper, because I realized I hadn't lost him. I had just discovered I was never part of his future at all. For the first few weeks after that night, I didn't cry. That's the part people don't talk about. You expect heartbreak to look dramatic. Tears, sleepless nights, music playing in the background like a movie. But for me, it was quieter than that. It was empty. The apartment felt wrong. Not because I missed him. By then, whatever version of Caleb I thought I loved had already been replaced by something colder. But because everything around me still carried the illusion of us. His coffee mug in the cabinet, his books on the shelf, the indentation on his side of the bed that hadn't quite disappeared yet. It felt like living inside a lie that hadn't realized it was over. He moved out while I was at school. No conversation. No goodbye. Just a key left on the counter and a note that said, "Thanks for understanding." I remember staring at that sentence for a long time. Understanding what? That I was convenient until I wasn't? That love was something he scheduled around billable hours? That 3 years could be reduced to a polite exit strategy? I didn't keep the note, but I didn't throw it away either. I folded it once and left it in a drawer I never opened again, like a small, controlled grave for something I refused to revisit. Instead of falling apart, I did what I've always done when things get unbearable. I worked. I stayed late at school, picked up extra responsibilities no one wanted, supervised after-school programs, helped with events, volunteered for committees I didn't even fully understand. I coached morning practice, afternoon practice, sometimes both. I filled every hour of my day until there was no space left for silence. Because silence was where everything lived. The kids saved me, even if they never knew it. They didn't care that my relationship had collapsed. They didn't care that I felt like I'd been quietly erased from someone's life. They just needed someone to show up. And I could do that. There was this one student, Marcus, 17. Angry at the world in that specific way teenage boys get when something important has been taken from them and no one explains why. His dad had left. His mom worked 2 jobs. He came to practice looking like he was ready to fight anyone who looked at him wrong. Most teachers had already labeled him a problem. But I saw something else. I saw someone who just needed proof that he mattered. So I stayed after practice with him, ran drills until the field lights shut off, drove him home when his mom couldn't make it, talked about everything except football, life, choices, anger, what you do when someone walks away from you without warning. He never said thank you, but the day he made varsity, he hugged me. Quick, awkward, like it embarrassed him. "You didn't give up on me," he muttered, and something inside me shifted. Because neither had I. Not really. Somewhere in all that noise and exhaustion and routine, the sharp edges of what Caleb had done started to dull. Not disappear, but soften. I repainted the apartment 3 weekends in a row. Warm colors. Nothing he would have chosen. I replaced furniture, piece by piece. Things from secondhand stores, estate sales, places with history that had nothing to do with him. I turned that space into something that belonged entirely to me. Not us. Not what we used to be. Just me. And for the first time since everything ended, that felt like freedom instead of loss. About 8 months later, someone mentioned Caleb at a gathering I almost didn't attend. He made junior partner, they said. Youngest in the firm. Of course he did. That had always been the plan. I nodded, smiled politely, and changed the subject. But later that night, lying in bed, I thought about it. Not with jealousy, not even with regret. Just curiosity. What did that kind of success feel like when you had no one to share it with? I didn't have to wonder for long, because over the next few months, the updates started trickling in, never directly from him, always through mutual friends who didn't realize they were piecing together a story for me. He was working more than ever. 14-hour days turned into 16. Then nights at the office. Then entire weekends disappearing into conference rooms and client calls. He dated someone, another lawyer. It lasted 4 months. Ended quietly. No fight. No drama. Just faded. Then a surgeon. That one barely lasted long enough to count. Too many schedules. Too many emergencies. Too many reasons not to show up. His life had become exactly what he'd chosen. Precise. Efficient. Empty. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I thought I would. I thought maybe there'd be some sense of justice in knowing he paid a price for what he did. But there wasn't. Because the truth is, he didn't lose anything. He got exactly what he wanted. And I was finally starting to understand. So did I. I met Daniel Brooks on a Tuesday afternoon, in a place I never would have expected. The school library. He was volunteering for a literacy program, helping younger kids who struggled with reading. I was there supervising a group of students earning community service hours. At first, I barely noticed him. Dark hair, slightly messy, glasses he kept pushing up his nose, the kind of person who blended into the background until you paid attention. But then I saw how he worked with the kids. There was this little girl, maybe 8 years old, who couldn't get through a single page without stumbling. She was frustrated, embarrassed, ready to give up. And Daniel didn't rush her, didn't correct her sharply or move on when it got awkward. He sat there for nearly 40 minutes, celebrating every word she got, right like it was something extraordinary. Not fake encouragement, real, patient, steady. like he genuinely believed she could do it. And for some reason, that hit me harder than anything else had in months. Because I realized that's what support actually looks like. Not competition, not calculation, just showing up. We started talking during breaks. Nothing serious at first. Just small conversations about books, about students, about the weird things kids say when they don't realize adults are listening. Then coffee. Then actual dates. Simple ones. Mini golf. Farmers markets. A secondhand bookstore where we spent 3 hours recommending books to each other and forgot to eat dinner. We ended up sharing pizza on a park bench at 9 p.m., laughing about nothing. And it was easy. That's the word I kept coming back to. Easy. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't feel like something I had to fight for. He came to my games, learned my players' names, remembered their stories, asked about Marcus like he'd known him for years. He met my family and fit into the chaos like he'd always been there. My mom adored him within 10 minutes. My dad argued with him about books like they were old friends. There was no adjustment period, no negotiation, no moment where I wondered if I was too much or not enough. He wanted me there. That was it. 10 months later, we stood by a lighthouse on Cape Cod. No audience, no pressure, just the ocean and the sound of waves breaking against the rocks. When I pulled out the ring, my hands didn't shake this time, because I already knew the answer. Yes, he said, before I even finished. Laughing, crying, pulling me into him like he'd been waiting for that moment just as much as I had. And in that second, everything became clear. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Not convincing someone to stay, not negotiating your place in their life, just standing in the same direction, wanting the same future. We got married 5 months later. Small ceremony, family, close friends. Half my football team insisting on being involved like it was their personal mission. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was perfect. And I thought that was the end of the story. Two people who chose different paths. Two lives that would never intersect again. Until one day, years later, his world cracked open, and suddenly, we were standing in the same room again. I didn't see Caleb again for almost 3 years. Not in person. Not even accidentally. He became one of those people who existed only in stories other people told. Updates passed casually, like small pieces of a life I used to know but no longer belonged to. And then, one afternoon, his world shifted because of something as simple as a photo. It showed up on a local news site, one of those community stories no one really pays attention to unless it's about someone they recognize. Local educator marries children's librarian. There was a picture of me and Daniel standing outside the courthouse, laughing at something I don't even remember now. My hand resting against his chest, his arm around my waist. It wasn't posed. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And that's what made it dangerous. I didn't know Caleb saw it. I didn't know that when his assistant pulled it up during lunch, casually pointing it out, he felt something crack. Not jealousy, something worse. Recognition. Because for the first time, he wasn't imagining what life with me could have been. He was seeing it, fully formed, complete, and entirely without him. I didn't know any of this at the time. All I knew was that a few months later I got an email. Professional, neutral, direct. A legal inquiry about an education funding case. From Caleb. I stared at the name for a long time before opening it. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. There was no spike in my chest, no rush of old feelings, just a quiet awareness that the past had finally caught up with the present. The meeting was scheduled at the district administration building, one of those gray, lifeless places where everything feels temporary and permanent at the same time. I arrived early, spreading reports across the table, preparing myself the same way I would for any other meeting. Because that's what it was now. Just work. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Not physically. He still looked like himself. But something about him had dimmed. The sharpness was still there, the precision, the control, but underneath it there was exhaustion, the kind that settles into your bones when you've been running too long without a reason to stop. Heidi, he said. Just my name. No warmth, no familiarity, but not cold either. Just distant. Caleb, I replied, and that was it. No awkwardness, no tension, just two people who used to know each other, now standing on opposite sides of a table. We got to work. Budgets, projections, program cuts, student impact. I walked him through everything methodically, explaining where funding mattered most, which programs couldn't survive reductions, which kids would be affected first. He listened, took notes, asked questions, professional, efficient. And for a while, it almost felt like the past didn't exist, until the door opened. Hey, I brought you coffee. Daniel stepped in, mid-sentence, holding 2 cups, and everything shifted. Caleb froze, just for a second, but I saw it, the way his eyes moved, from Daniel, to me, to my stomach. I was 6 months pregnant. It wasn't something you could miss. Daniel smiled, walking over without hesitation, placing the coffee in front of me before resting his hand gently at my back. That small, unconscious gesture, protective, familiar, natural. Sorry, he said, glancing at Caleb. Didn't mean to interrupt. It's fine, I replied, softer than I realized. I turned slightly. Caleb, this is my husband, Daniel. He works at the children's library. Daniel extended his hand immediately. Nice to meet you, he said, warm and genuine, like he meant it. Caleb shook it, brief, controlled. Likewise. But his attention kept drifting back, to the way Daniel stood close to me, to the way I leaned into it without thinking, to the life that existed between us without needing explanation. Daniel looked at the papers spread across the table. This is about the school funding case, right? He asked. Thank you for taking it. The kids really need this. There was no performance in his voice, no hidden meaning, just sincerity. And somehow, that made it worse. Because Caleb wasn't just seeing what he lost, he was seeing what replaced him. The meeting continued, but something had changed. Not externally. We still discussed numbers, strategies, legal angles. But underneath it, there was something unspoken. Every time Daniel's hand brushed mine, every time I smiled without thinking, every time my phone lit up with a photo of our daughter, Lily, covered in finger paint and grinning like she'd just discovered something magical. Caleb saw it. All of it. The life he had dismissed. The future he had calculated away. The distraction he couldn't afford. Now, standing right in front of him. Real. Warm. Complete. At one point, he asked about the pregnancy. Polite. Expected. When are you due? 2 months, I said. Daniel smiled. Our second. Lily's already planning to be the boss. I laughed. Of course she is. It was a small moment. Nothing significant, but it landed harder than anything else in that room. Because it wasn't forced. It wasn't strategic. It was just life. When the meeting ended, we shook hands again. Professional. Final. Good luck with the case, I said. You too, he replied. And that was it. No lingering, no looking back. Just closure that didn't need to be spoken. 6 weeks later, he won the case. The funding was restored. The program survived. He sent me a short email confirming the outcome. I replied with a simple thank you. And that was the last time we ever spoke. But his story didn't end there. Because some choices don't show their consequences immediately. They wait, quietly, until everything else is built on top of them. And then, they collapse. 2 months after the trial, Caleb missed a major filing deadline. First time in his career. He'd been awake for nearly 3 days straight. His body just stopped. The firm called him in, not for praise, not for promotion, but for a warning. He wasn't an asset anymore. He was a liability. And for someone like Caleb, that was worse than failure. That was identity collapse. A week later, he took his first vacation in 4 years, went home, slept for 3 days, didn't recognize himself when he woke up. And somewhere in that silence, everything caught up to him. The years, the choices, the sacrifices, the realization that he had built everything he thought he wanted, and none of it meant anything when there was no one left to share it with. 3 months later, he resigned, walked away from the firm, sold the apartment, started over, smaller cases, normal hours, a life that looked nothing like the one he fought so hard to build. Someone told me they ran into him at a coffee shop months after that. Said he looked different, softer, like he'd finally stopped trying to outrun something. He asked about me. They told him I was happy, that I had everything, a family, a career, a life that felt full. He just nodded, said he was glad, that he'd made mistakes he couldn't undo. But he was trying to build something real now. I don't know if he ever found it. I don't know if he ever understood the exact moment everything changed. But I do. It wasn't when he rejected me. It wasn't when he chose his career. It was earlier than that. The moment he decided that love was something optional, something negotiable, something he could come back to later. Because the truth is, some choices don't close doors. They erase them. And by the time you realize what was on the other side, it's already gone. As for me, I didn't lose anything that night in that restaurant. I just walked away from a life that was never going to choose me. And somehow, that turned out to be the best decision I ever made.